All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, October the 18th. To get started, I would ask that everybody who's able to please stand for the playing of the national anthem. Thank you. We would also like to take an opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest by any member of council this evening? Councillor Wagner.
Yes, thank you very much. I have one for item agenda number 9, and I have already submitted to the clerk.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right, on to minutes from the Committee of Adjustment meeting held October the 4th. Can I get mover and seconder to adopt those minutes as presented? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Donato. Any discussion on those? Okay, can I get I have the mover and seconder. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? It's carried. All right, Madam Clerk, were there any questions submitted for question period?
No questions this evening, Your Worship.
All right. Takes us to presentations. We are joined by Dr. Michael Stefanos this evening to talk about providing diagnostic imaging services in the town of Shelburne. Dr. Stefanos, is he online?
Yes, Your Honor.
Hi there, how are you?
Good.
Good. The floor is yours, so walk us through your presentation.
I will do that. I want to find out how I can share my screen. I don't use Zoom for that purpose.
I'm not the one to ask, but I think that probably help.
Why don't I do that for you? Why don't I do that for you? And
oh,
then
please,
you
yes.
tell
Thank
me
you,
when
Jennifer.
to advance to the next slide. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Let's go here. There we go.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this time to present about opportunities for to do open diagnostic imaging services in Shelburne. My name is Dr. Michael Stefanos. I've been a radiologist at Headwaters for the last 10 years. I finished my residency and fellowship at the U of T and did a fellowship in what they call women's imaging. So it's specifically for the health of women and their children. So breast imaging, pelvic disease, fetal imaging, that's my niche. I do everything else, including that specifically. And I've been involved in in Headwaters at different levels, currently holding the position of the lead radiologist for the Ontario Breast Screening Program at the hospital, and also vice president of the Medical Association. Yes, next slide, please. Yes. Why Shelburne? Why diagnostic imaging services? Well, there's been an identified need for that, for this kind of service in Shelburne for many years, dating back to when Shelburne actually had a hospital and X-ray services. And there was talk at that time to advance it to include ultrasound, but that never came to fruition. And actually, we closed down, sadly, the X-ray services even that was being provided at Shelburne. Currently, there's increasing growth. I tried to check the latest census for the population in Shelburne. I couldn't find anything, but I think it's around the 10,000 mark, plus catchment area, pushing it to close to 20. Everyone around the table here knows more about that than me. But currently, people in Shelburne go far for their services, Orangeville, Alliston, Tottenham, Markdale, and Fergus, and even further for some other kinds of studies. Next slide, please. The data analysis and shared with me done back in 2019 when there was a proposal to do a diagnostic imaging services here. They estimated 2,900 tests being needed or being ordered by the physicians in Shelburne, and with a modest estimate of increased growth of 5 to 10%, not taking into account growth population as well, which would push that number even greater. We were looking currently around 3,500 tests approximately. I don't have solid data. Next slide, please. To move a license, it's much more complicated than simply opening a clinic. You actually have to move a license from somewhere else in Ontario. There hasn't been new licenses for diagnostic image clinics issued since the 80s. So they just move them from one place to another without the creation of any new ones. And a license comes in, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail, but it has its relative relevance. Each license comes in 5 combinations of different components: X-ray, ultrasound, nuclear medicine, mammography, and BMD. And you need to move it from a place to another under certain rules and regulations that have been set up by the Ministry of Health, and specifically the IHF division, which is the Independent Health Facility. And this is a copy of part of their application process, saying that we need an independent health facility who wishes to relocate shall apply to the director. The director will approve the relocation under certain conditions. And the director will require information from both sites, the selling person of the license and purchaser. Next slide, please. The limits, they divide them into 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3. The one we're looking at is a level 3. So basically moving a license from outside a catchment area, which in this condition, in this situation would be Dufferin, and moving it into Dufferin. And to do that, next slide, a level 3 will require, will only be considered, and that's very important, will only be considered if we're moving it from a catchment area that is over-serviced or adequately serviced to a catchment area, in this case, Dufferin, specifically Shelburne, that is under-serviced for the same license modalities. Based on current ministry data that I recently obtained with the help of Susan Schwartztek, Director of Regional Programs in Ontario Health Central Region, is that Dufferin is considered adequately licensed for all modalities. That means they would not even consider an application because according to their data, everything is adequately serviced in Dufferin, not excluding, that includes Shelburne, obviously. Next slide. just a brief understanding of what they mean by catchment. Catchment is any area that's over 100,000. So for instance, Mississauga is a catchment area. Milton recently became more than 100,000, so it became its own catchment area. So if a city is not 100,000, then they move to a municipality or a county until they reach the 100,000 mark, and they mark here and they call that a catchment area. That's why Dufferin, the whole of Dufferin, is considered a single catchment area. Next slide. So in conclusion, what have I done so far? Well, I've gone to the ministry, updated made sure of the current situation of what Shelburne is considered as adequately serviced. And we reached out to the IHF through the Director of Regional Programs, Ontario Health Centre, and asked them, would they even consider an application? And they said they would not consider an application under current circumstances because Dufferin is adequately serviced. I, after that, reached out to my colleagues, the physicians working in Shelburne, Dr. Soor, who's the medical director of Dufferin Oaks Long-Term Care Home, Dr. Shatta, the lead physician of Shelburne Center of Health, Dr. Amy Catania, the lead physician in Shelburne, and asked them, is there a perceived need? All of them unanimously said, we need it now. We need it yesterday, not. I reached out also to, through the help of Dr. Catania, to Bob Barden, who is the chair of the Community Wellness Council, and he also provided his support to this initiative. I've been in contact with the Hills of Headwaters Ontario Health team to get their support. I have not still been able to secure that support. There's been some need to do for them to do some homework to assess the impact on Headwaters Hospital if a license is opened in Shelburne. And I would like to give the floor, if I would be allowed, for Dr. Catania to give her perspective. She has worked locally in Shelburne for many, many years and would give additional insight into this process, if I would be allowed to do so, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Stefanos, for allowing me to have a quick brief information about what's going on in terms of DI in Shelburne. So I'm a family physician. I've been a family physician in Shelburne for coming on 9 years now, but have been in the Dufferin area for almost 18 years. And I can say my biggest challenge moving my practice from the Orangeville area to the Shelburne area has been the lack of diagnostic imaging. So the thing I find the most frustrating for our patients and the residents in Shelburne and surrounding area is the length that they have to travel to get these diagnostic tests. And unfortunately, they're traveling great lengths when they're sick often. And it also changes the decisions that we make as family physicians as to whether or not we're even going to order tests or how we're going to manage these patients. Often people are sick and they're having to go either to Alliston or Orangeville. I even have people traveling to Collingwood, and over and over and over. It is not a day that goes by that my patients tell me, when is diagnostic imaging coming to Shelburne? When can we get our imaging done at home? Why is this not able to be done here? So when Dr. Stefanos called me and said that he was, picking up this torch, I was right behind him, and all of the physicians. There's now 10 family physicians in Shelburne, which is amazing. We are way further ahead than we were when I was the only one that came in 2012, I guess it was. So as a result, there's also more tests that are being ordered, and unfortunately more patients that are having to leave the community to get those tests. I worry that I think the ministry probably has old data and they don't realize the influx of citizens into the community. They don't realize the changes that have happened. And I hope that, we can advocate both for the citizens, our community, and really work to get this service, which I think is so needed. And again, I thank Dr. Stefanos as well as all of you for the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm available for any questions if anyone has questions for me.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As members of council will know that the deputy mayor and I were actually involved in some conversations with folks from Headwaters prior to COVID on this very issue. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, those plans were sort of set aside for more pressing issues. But certainly I'm very glad to hear that, as Dr. Catania said, you've picked up the torch and are willing to carry this through. And certainly I, for one, would like to offer whatever help we can at this level, because certainly there is a need there. One of the things that was made pretty clear through the discussions that the deputy mayor and I had with the folks from the hospital was that, as you point out, when we're talking about catchment areas, we're not just looking at Shelburne proper. That there's a significant number of people who would use these services who don't live within the physical boundaries of this municipality. So although, yes, our population may be approximately 10,000 people, we're going to be drawing significantly more than that. And there certainly is a need for this whole part of the northern county, as well as southern parts of Grey County, as well as parts of Simcoe, I suspect, as well. So again, whatever we can do to offer support. I see at the end of your presentation there, you're looking for support, as well as some lobbying, perhaps, to the local MPP. Certainly all of that's within our ability. So I'll open it up for questions, but I think what I would suggest is that we pass a resolution in support. Council can direct me to write a letter of support, and also what I would like to see is that we forward this to the County of Dufferin and ask for their support as well, because again, this is not just a town of Shelburne issue. This really is a central to northern Dufferin County issue. So I think the more help and more support we can get from a larger base, the better it'll be. So with that, are there any questions or comments from other members of council? Councillor Bernardo.
I agree with everything you said, Your Worship, but I also think that we need the support of the mayors of both Meliant and Mulmer, as well as Mono and Amaranth. And their respective councils should also pass motions in support along with ours. And I think we should also contact the MPP verbally, and you can do that perhaps on behalf of council and speak to her in person and indicate to her the fact that with the hospital long gone and the fact that we've grown and the amount of people we are drawing into this community, that she should advocate on our behalf to the Ministry of Health. I think her voice added to all of ours would be extremely helpful. And yes, the letter gets there, but I think the verbal comment by yourself may indicate where council's coming from. And I'm quite glad to make the motion that we need to forward on.
Okay, thank you. So what I might suggest is that we forward it to the county, as well as all lower tiers within the county. Do you think we should include Southgate Township as well?
I think that would be extremely useful, yes, because they do come from as far as Dundalk down towards the Shelburne area for medical. And even East Luther, I think, may come this way, so may even have to go that far.
Okay. Dr. Stefano, sorry, and then I'll just go to Councillor Buffett. So beyond addressing a letter to the MPP, and as Councillor Bernardo said, I'm more than happy to give her a call as well. But beyond that letter, which agency should we actually address this letter to? Which office does the director, so to speak, as the legislation speaks from?
Yes, Your Honor. It's basically the Director of Independent Health Facilities, Ministry of Health.
Okay.
That's the full title of the person. And that's the person that receives the applications and makes the decision of a yay or nay regarding moving a license from one place to another.
Okay, excellent. Councillor Buffett?
Yes, and in keeping with all of the requests that we're going to get from the surrounding area, I think it would also be worthwhile, once we collect that, to forward it on to the Minister of Health herself and to the Premier, since we've got an election coming up next year. And it might be a good opportune time to make sure that they realize that this is a very important issue.
Yep, good point. Okay. Nobody else? No? Okay, so Councillor Bernardo, I think everybody has an appreciation of the nature of the motion. We can let the clerk maybe craft some more precise language after the fact, if that's okay, Jennifer. But basically, we're authorizing me to draft some letters of support. Council supports the initiative, and we'll get those letters sent out to the appropriate authorities. So the motion is on the table. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Fegan. Okay, any further discussion on it? All in favor? It's carried unanimously. Well, thank you both very much for the presentation and for your efforts thus far, and hopefully we can help push you across the goal line.
Thank you so much for your time and support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Are there any council inquiries for this evening? Okay. So we'll jump right into reports then. So the first report is from the town planner regarding an update on the Flato Shelburne 1 Meadows development on the west end. Steve, how are you?
Good, Mr. Mayor. Evening, everybody. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation for this report. It's just for information at this point. This is kind of the next quarterly update. We missed an earlier update over the summer just because of the number of other reports that we were working on. So this covers both Q2 and Q3 of 2021 and outlines some next steps for the current quarter, Q4. So last time you received a report on this application, we had just received the application in March. I should say applications. So there are multiple applications that have been filed, official plan amendment at both the town and county levels to change the urban area boundary in the county official plan, as well as to designate the land for residential and commercial uses in the town official plan and bring it into the urban boundary. And a zoning bylaw amendment to implement some rezoning to residential and commercial, as well as a draft plan of subdivision. And again, this is for the phase 1 development, which is consisting of a proposed seniors apartment building and a commercial plaza on the north side of Main Street West. So in the analysis section of the report, I've outlined some of the main activities that occurred since receiving the application. So there was some clarification required in reviewing the application for completeness in terms of some of the reports that were submitted. The applicant resubmitted the correct reports to address that. That was really just to do with some of the geotechnical and environmental site assessment work that was done. We did consult with the NVCA risk management official, RMO, Ryan Post, because the site is within a source water protection area or wellhead protection zone, to see if the RMO required any additional information or specific pre-app consultation before we deem the application complete, but the RMO was satisfied that they could request additional information if required through the application process. And of course, there was some coordination with the county and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So the ministry is the approval authority for the related county official plan amendment. The main policy of concern with such an application is the servicing requirement. So I think we've discussed this previously, but when a private application is made for a settlement area expansion, there's a requirement in the growth plan that existing reserve capacity be available within the wastewater and water supply systems. Whereas if you go through a municipal comprehensive review process, which is the process the county is undertaking, the requirement is planned capacity. So we wanted some clarification with the ministry and the county about their interpretation of those policies. It was generally agreed that an application can still be processed, but at the point of making a decision on such a private application, it would have to be determined if that servicing policy is addressed or not. So we've continued to move the application through the process. Ultimately, with that clarification from the ministry and some coordination with the county on their notice of complete application, the application was deemed complete in June, and it was circulated to all of the agencies and departments for review. During that course of having that servicing discussion, council recall that Flato had made a request to have some servicing allocation considered for their phase 1 development within the current remaining plant capacity. And as we all know, that was reviewed with all of the development stakeholders who had existing development approvals or applications in process to determine if there in fact is any capacity that will remain unused for a period of time. However, you can see I've summarized the outcome of that process, having had the special meeting. Ultimately, Flato indicated that they were not requesting the reallocation of servicing from existing approved developments to their development, and confirmed support for the town's initiative to advance the wastewater plant upgrades to the design phase. So you'll recall there were some allocations renewed and reconfirmed, and some new allocations determined back in May. Specifically, 3 existing draft plan approved subdivisions, Fieldgate, Scone, and 600 Main Street East, their allocations were renewed. A 51 cubic meter per day reserve was set for industrial, commercial, and institutional development in the stage 2 area, and a 10 cubic meter per day for residential and mixed use infill in stage 1 and 2 areas. The final direction from that process on servicing allocation was to continue with the processing of applications in play, even though those applications may exceed the remaining servicing capacity in the plant. So the notice of complete application was issued. There were some qualifications just to clarify matters around the requirement for servicing capacity, and that in fact there is not existing reserve capacity for the application at this time, but the town is moving in a direction to provide that capacity through future wastewater plant upgrades. The other implication of deeming an application complete at this time is that it does lock in the development charge rates, which is a bit of a concern for this development because we don't fully understand the full costs of servicing the west area. So there's a few ways that could play out. We don't necessarily have to have a full handle on that right now, but when decisions are made on these applications, we'll bring forward some additional information about that. And at that point, we should have more information from the town's master servicing studies and transportation related studies that will detail some of the servicing costs expected and how those may be recovered through development charges or other means in order to allow the west area to develop as planned. I'd say the final main point as an update to council, you've heard previously about the requirements for access in this area. The highway is under MTO jurisdiction across the frontage of this property, all the way out to 4th line and beyond. So the Ministry of Transportation advised early in the process that there wouldn't be any access permitted unless a highway access management plan is permitted or is completed by the town, working with MTO to demonstrate that that can be done without causing negative traffic impacts to the highway. So that HAMP process is still being worked out with MTO in terms of the scope of work and how it will be cost shared with MTO. We've essentially been waiting for MTO to get back to us on how that cost sharing will look and to confirm the terms of reference, but we're very close to having that sorted out. I've noted the comments that we've received over the summer and the early part of the fall so far. So a number of agencies have responded and we've sent those comments to the applicant. The county planning comments did note that the town should withhold any decisions on these applications until the county itself has made a decision on the related county official plan amendment, either through the municipal comprehensive review or through advancing Flattow's application to the county further through the process. At the time of writing the report, we had not received comments from a number of agencies. We have since received today the MTO comments. Again, they just reinforced their previous comments about the requirement for a highway access management plan that the town and MTO need to complete together to address spacing of intersections. And they've identified that MTO permits will be required prior to any development, and that they'll provide further comments regarding a traffic impact study that was submitted by Flatto in relation to the highway access management plan later on. We have not received comments back from the ministry. It's not clear if they're going to comment on this application or not. Township of Melancton has not provided any comments, and the school board, as well as Canada Post and Rogers. We are still working with SBA as well on the engineering review comments. And then once we have all of those comments, we'll prepare a consolidated summary of the planning comments as well. For this current quarter, Q4, we'll continue to follow up with the agencies and departments regarding the remaining outstanding circulation comments, review those, complete our planning comments, issue those to the applicant, and then await further revised submissions. So it really is just going through the normal application process at this point. And there'll be more information presented to council once all the comments are in. And there will be a public meeting requirements as per any application as well, and public notice. We did give public notice that the applications have been received, and we have not received any public comments as of yet, but there'll be opportunity for public submissions through a public meeting later on in the process. And then lastly, there was an update to County Council. Mayor and Deputy Mayor would have heard it last Thursday at the County Council meeting regarding the Municipal Comprehensive Review from WSP. And they have some preliminary findings available now from their land needs assessment. So they are indicating up to 84 hectares of additional residential land may be required in Shelburne specifically, as well as 9.4 hectares of commercial and institutional land. So those numbers actually align fairly closely with the amount of land left on the west side of Shelburne that's not in the urban boundary. So there is an early sign here of some county level justification for an urban expansion. And through that presentation, WSP just noted that there are some things that the county and the town have to work together on to complete the next part of the justification. The first part is demonstrating the need for more land. The second part is demonstrating that the land can be developed and serviced. So that's where some of these servicing studies that SBA is working on, the highway access management plan with MTO, there's some agricultural review that needs to take place as well, that those reports and studies have to be submitted by the county to the province as part of their justification for expanding the urban boundary of Shelburne. So we're working closely with the county's consultants on all of those matters as well. So that's my presentation of the report. It's just a brief summary for tonight for information, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Questions for the planner? Deputy Mayor?
So not a question, but just to say thanks, Steve, for moving this along, obviously in an appropriate way and in consultation with the applicant and with the county. As council, we've asked for updates, and you certainly have met that. And I just want to say I appreciate what you're doing, and we look forward to the next report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? No, okay, can I get a motion then to receive the planner's report for information? Councillor Buffett, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? It's carried. All right, so next is another report from Steve regarding the condo development by Scone Developments, Inc. Looking at surplusing and conveying some land at the end of First Avenue, as well as considering a proposed street name.
Yeah, and this one does benefit a little bit from a couple of images, just to help understand what we're looking at. Did the presentation share?
Yeah.
Okay. So you all know where the subject property is. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that. Just to recap, there are 2 draft plan approvals on the site currently. Draft plan of subdivision, which establishes 6 blocks for townhouse units, 1 block for a consolidation of common elements, being a roadway, parking, stormwater management pond, sidewalk, services and utilities. All of that will be part of the plan of condominium, and a future development block at the south end of the site on Main Street at Gordon. And then the other draft plan applicable to the site is the draft plan of condominium. So that just breaks that block 9 out into the different common element components. So again, parking at either end of the road, common element private roadway, sidewalk on the west side, stormwater management pond at the south end. So since this plan was first conceptualized back in, I think it was about 2011 when the zoning process began, it was noted that there is a notch out of the site right here. And that is just a westerly kind of extension of First Avenue. So the town owns that little notch right now. Second Avenue, conversely, just meets the property at an even kind of straight property line. So this became a bit problematic for the design and layout of the subdivision, particularly connecting the north part to the stormwater management area and visitor parking down here, and some of the servicing design that goes with that. So it was identified in the conditions of approval that this section of First Avenue right-of-way would have to be purchased by the developer, who the owner is now Scone, and the town would then, if that's approved, stop and close that section of First Avenue and surplus the property. So that's been looked at to make sure that all of the impacts of that are understood, and the applicant is prepared a draft reference plan. So the part is quite small. It's part 1 on this plan, which is attached to my report. That part is 344 square meters. So a fairly small area of land. There is a small paved area of road. It's kind of right at the end of the street, no turnaround or anything. The main impact is for 226 First Avenue, which they're impacted by the development anyway, because their existing driveway encroaches through the Scone property. You can see this section of it right here goes right through the Scone land and then connects to First Avenue. So it was identified way back when the first concept plans for this development came forward, that this driveway will have to be realigned in order to remove the encroachment on the development site and to reconnect with First Avenue a different way. So we've worked on the detail of that with Scone, who's worked it out with the homeowner. That basically, whereas the driveway currently looks like this, coming from the front of the dwelling down to First Ave through the Scone property, would be realigned like this to the new roadway. So that puts the driveway entirely on the property of 226 First Ave. It resolves the encroachment issue. It does require some impact to an existing tree on their property. But what the other option that was looked at was to bring it right down to First Avenue in this location. So this is the north side of First Avenue, where the property has a narrow frontage. But with grading and everything in that area, that would impact a fairly mature tree on the adjoining property to the east and require its removal in all likelihood. So This was seen as the least impact in terms of a solution for maintaining the driveway access for 226. Now, the one legal implication of that is that driveway for 226 will technically now be on the private condominium roadway. So there will be an easement required for a short distance from basically the north end of the driveway back to the new limit of the First Ave right of way, which is this black line right here. So right now the right of way comes all the way down in here. If what's proposed by Scone in terms of acquiring a portion of the right of way is approved, this section of it here would be stopped and closed and conveyed to Scone. So again, it's shown right here. It's this kind of, not quite a perfect rectangle, but this kind of irregular shape right here. So I can come back to these images if we need, but I'll stop sharing for now. And the other purpose of my report is just regarding the proposed street naming for the development. So I've outlined the requested street name. So Scone's planners design plan have filed an application for a street name, just as is normally done for a new subdivision. That's been reviewed under the street naming policy. The policy does apply both to public roads that will be assumed by the town as well as new private condominium roads. The policy provides some guidance on basic, mandatory requirements that the names must meet, which include things like no conflict with existing street names, easy enough to spell and pronounce, not offensive, those kinds of things. And then it provides some guidance, some nice to have sort of things. And the nice to haves relate to linking the street name to the heritage and identity of the town, recognizing people who are families or names who've made significant contributions locally, things that maybe result to the local area, create neighborhood and community identity. So the basis for the street name, it really was something that the developer came up with. And they did incorporate in the acronym. I don't know that the general public would appreciate or understand this, but the S is standing for Shelburne, and then the remaining letters are standing for names of people who are significant to the developer and to the builder. So more personal relationships, family members. If that is not satisfactory to council, I have suggested some alternatives that could be considered. Originally, this development was going to be linked to a railway theme because of its location where the train station used to be. There was some proposal by the previous owner that maybe they would call it Shelburne Station. That's still an idea that may come forward as part of the future development block 7 at the south end. But a street name had never been discussed at that stage. So I've identified some possible other options, and the owner has confirmed that they would support those options as an alternative as well, obviously preferring to have Scone if they can. But the two other options, and I've compared this with the countywide street index to make sure they're not a conflict, railway lane or junction lane or something similar along those lines could be considered, given the road will be parallel to the former railway. Station Street would have been very appropriate because it used to be a train station there, but there is a Station Street already in the township of Amaranth, so we can't use the word station, unfortunately, in a street name in Shelburne. So I've presented the recommendation on the street name as with some discretion by council as to whether you wish to support the name Scone that the developer has proposed, or if you would prefer, indicate direction to staff on an alternative name. Either one of the two names that I've proposed, I think those would both be appropriate, or if you would like more time to consider or consult with others on other options, we could bring back a further report with those options as well. So that's my my report, and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo and then Councillor Buffett.
I'm going to comment on the name. I can remember the railway station. I'm old enough to remember that it stood there and what it looked like. And I prefer to see the railway name put there. I don't like the fact that we're naming it after families or whatever connection it has to the builder and developers' families. That's what the names of some of the streets in Shelburne with the original Jelly family names. When you look at, and then we have names that other people have put in as family names up in some of the other areas. But I prefer that we go towards heritage rather than, or if not heritage, like we've done in the past with Indigenous or someone that's contributed, you know, whether they're a war hero or participated in the war or done something for Shelburne. But Railway State, a name that reflects on the fact that it was a junction of the railway. Even that small piece of First Avenue that you were commenting on, that was the original street where the carriages used to go through to pick up stuff from the railway. So it has quite a bit of heritage in that area tied to the railway. So that would be my preference for a name in that regards, that it reflects what the heritage of Shelburne was in that area. And that's the end of my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Buffett?
Yes, I have to agree with Councillor Bernardo on that, because I think naming it something that relates to the heritage or the history of that particular site is important. And I just wanted to ask a question. Steve had mentioned that we couldn't call it Station Street. Can we call it Station Lane?
No,
Or can we not use
unfortunately,
anything with station?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And actually, I should have mentioned as well that First Avenue was originally Station Street,
Yeah,
and it was renamed to First Avenue in part because of street name conflicts. And one of the aspects of the street naming policy is that former street names that used to exist
Right.
in Shelburne can't be used again. So
Okay.
even just changing to lane or you know, avenue or something like that, it's still too much of a conflict in terms of emergency street naming.
okay. Anyways, with regards to just carrying on, I just wanted to make sure that we maybe give some more preference to something that relates to the heritage of the area. Because I think that's very important. It's a very prominent site. And it would be good to have that kept in mind in terms of the street naming. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Jennifer, you have something to add?
Thank you, and through your worship, I just wanted to note that the Heritage Committee has named the back lane along that area as Station Lane. And so while it's not recognized as a proper street, it's not built to current standards, the back lane there has been named Station Lane.
That actually was going to be a question, Steve. So all of the suggestions that we have refer to this street as lane. And I'm just wondering if that creates any conflict, you know, probably not in a legal sense, but does that create any, you know, confusion, given the fact that we have started naming our back lanes?
I don't think so. I had given some thought to that, but one of the streets in the Fieldgate development, for example, is Leanne Lane.
Yeah.
So there are, I don't know if there are other examples. I can't think of any, but the use of the term lane hasn't been restricted to the original rear lanes. And why those names were more flexible is that they're not used for addressing purposes. So that, you know, it's more of a heritage feature as opposed to a legal addressing matter.
What sort of timing do we have to actually determine the final name?
It could certainly come back at a future meeting. The finalized addressing for the site occurs around, plan registration. So that's probably still a few weeks out. So we could certainly, bring it back to a meeting in late October or November if needed.
Okay.
I guess it would be November at this point.
Yeah, I agree with Councillors Bernardo and Buffett. I mean, personally, I would like to see something that ties this to the rail heritage of that site. Railway Lane, Junction Lane. I mean, that's getting there. It's still a bit, generic. I think in my mind, I'm sort of thinking through this as you were talking. My great grandfather was a CP station agent, and I'm wondering how difficult it might be to find out, some of the family names of station agents that managed that location over the years, and maybe tie it in that way. And the reason I asked about timing was, if that was something that we kick over to the Heritage Committee, but it doesn't sound like we have a whole lot of time on our side to come up with a name. So maybe it's something we could all sort of take a look at over the next little while, and come back and visit at our November meeting. Councillor Buffett.
Just in relation to your comment about the Heritage meeting, maybe we could put it on our agenda and have a discussion and come up with some ideas ourselves that we can forward to council.
Yeah, when I was on the committee last term, when we did the Back Lane naming project, we utilized some resources at Museum of Dufferin.
Right.
And actually the former curator there, Wayne Townsend, was a great resource, and did a ton of research in coming up with names that were, location appropriate for each of those back lanes. So, Councillor Bernardo.
The Rose Book that we have may give us some as well, because there's quite a bit of information on the town, especially the early part of the history of the town. So that may be another way of looking at it, going through there, and maybe do some research in it as well. So.
Yep. Looks like Kim has her hand up. Kim, feel free.
Who's Kim? Who's Kim?
I was going to mention Kim Harrison McMillan is the planner for Scone and is attending tonight. Kim, she may have some comments about this discussion, just to give some more background on the proposed name.
Sure.
Thank you, Steve, and through you, Mayor Mills. I just wanted to speak in terms of the urgency in regards to the street name. So we are definitely open to alternatives for the street name, especially in line with the heritage of the site. I think our concern is just more in terms of delaying this discussion. It's currently affecting our ability to move forward with Hydro One and our application through their office. So if we could have, if we could expedite that conversation and come to a decision on a street name sooner than later, it would be very much appreciated.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, and I certainly don't think it's something that should take an inordinate amount of time, but I do get the sense that there's a feeling around the table that I think council would like something that ties into some of the local heritage. So, okay. All right, any other questions for Steve? Steve, go ahead.
I can just add, Mr. Mayor, that for the other part of the report, as it relates to the surplusing of the First Avenue and conveying that land, that does require some notice and coming back to council with a further report in the bylaw anyway. So we had anticipated, if the recommendation was supported tonight, we would be back with something on that at the first meeting in November. So we can also bring back more information on the street naming with some other options and with other ideas that council may come up with between now and then, if that suits.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the recommendation that's included in the agenda is, provides enough flexibility for that. I mean, it simply says the council will consider the request and consider other possibilities, and will provide direction to staff. So on that basis, can I get a mover and seconder for the motion that reads, be it resolved that council receives report P 2021-43 for information, and the council directs staff to give public notice of the town's intent to stop up and close, declare surplus, and dispose of a portion of the First Avenue West road allowance, having an area of 344.12 square meters, and to bring forward the necessary bylaw for council consideration so that the land can be conveyed to Scone Development Inc., and that council considers support for the proposed street name for the private condominium road and draft plan of subdivision, file number DPS 17-02, and draft plan of condominium, file number DPC 17-02, as Scone Lane or an alternative name linked to the history of the adjoining railway and direct staff on the preferred street name. Moved by Councillor Bernardo. Seconded by Councillor Fegan. Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. Okay, thank you, Steve. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a report from our Director of Development and Operations regarding the encroachment at 604 Owen Sound Street.
Through your worship, back at the June 28th council meeting, staff did present a report on concerns of congestion on Jane Street, which is attached as Appendix 1. The report did outline the current non-compliance with the zoning bylaw and the potential liability of the municipal right-of-way being used for commercial operation. During this discussion, council was concerned about impacts, possible impacts on the business owner by enforcing the bylaw, and requested that staff again contact the owner for his opinions for a solution or options. Staff did contact the owner of the property September 29th. Staff informed the owner of the recommendations from the June report to council, and that council had passed a resolution to defer the matter until there had been further consultation with the owner. The owner of the property again did state his preference for this, his preferred solution to the issue would be making a no parking zone along the north side of Jane Street from Owen Sound west. As well as the addition of painted markings on the street to delineate the area. This would allow the owner to continue placing produce for sale within the town owned property. For this option to work, no parking zone would approximately be 40 meters long, run the frontage of that property on Jane Street, and stop at the west property line. Would still allow parking for the Canada Post office boxes off the road on the paved shoulder, a paved portion of the right of way. Now, to go with this option, these no parking signs still would need to be located 2.1 meters or 4 feet off the travel portion of the road. So this would, for snow removal purposes, same as they are in any other location, you have to have them far enough off the road that the wings of the plow are not going to catch them. This would still put them within that paved apron that's being used to present produce right now. The painted lines or hash marks on the road in this location just would not work. This would confuse traffic, in our opinion, and force traffic from the north side or westbound into the second portion of the travel portion of the road. Typically, these hash marks are used in locations like on Main Street where you have designated parking lines already, and then the hash marks are coming up to a corner to notify you that you can't park in that area due to sight lines, turning radius for trucks, so on and so forth, or at crosswalks, that sort of thing. They're not used in a travel portion of the road. So to go with this option also does leave us with a liability issue using the town right of way. So we would suggest a road occupancy, or even better, an encroachment permit be taken out with the town to go with the no parking area and still use the right of way. This is what we do for service installations, whether it's gas, Enbridge, special events, the farmers market, that sort of thing. This would also necessitate an insurance policy, proof of insurance, which we always ask for in the amount of $2 million, and that the town be named on that policy just to cover liability. Just as a further note, town staff has been dealing with a number of residents over the course of the summer who have been placing objects, bollards, structures at the end of their driveways, right in the municipal road allowance, right off the curb line. And that can be, that's shown in Appendix 3, one example of those that we do have. This is going to inhibit winter control, snow removal issues, When they're covered in snow and we're trying to wing back, they are going to get hit. And there is a potential there that it's going to damage our plow equipment, whether that's breaking the shear pins in the wing or possibly snapping a wing cable. In instances where the sidewalk's on the same side, it could lead to the sidewalk track hoses being damaged as well. So we're just afraid that if we do make an exception here, that might set a precedent that that would deviate from our zoning bylaw that we're trying to use to enforce this. And these residents may ask for the same consideration there as well. So a copy of that letter that was sent out, that's in the report as Appendix 4. Under financial impacts, if we go with enforcement of the zoning bylaw, there wouldn't be any financial impacts to the town. If we prefer to go with the no parking zone, the asphalt on that paved apron just north of the curb line on Jane Street would have to be cut to install the posts. So with signs, posts, hardware, staff time, we're looking at approximately $500 cost to install these 6 signs. Normally they're placed no more than 50 meters apart, no parking signs. To be effective there, we feel we'd need 6 of them. So one saying no parking from Owen Sound west, a number, 4 more of them across the front, and then one on the far side of the property saying no parking facing towards the east towards the property. If we're also including an encroachment permit there, there would be additional legal costs that we'd incur to get that encroachment permit produced by a lawyer. With policy implications, if we go with staff's recommendation, staff would work with the property owner to have the structures removed from the right-of-way, implementing the zoning bylaw. To go with the property owner's preference, there would need to be alterations to bylaw 8-1983 as amended, or the parking bylaw, no parking bylaw. And we'd need to make those changes and then return that to council for approval. Consultations were with town planner, director of legislative services or a clerk, and municipal bylaw enforcement, our municipal bylaw enforcement officer. And after that consultation, we figured to be in standing with our zoning bylaw and take a uniform approach. The most appropriate recommendation would be to go with our original recommendation from the June report to have the produce removed from the municipal right-of-way. So Appendix 1, that's our previous report to council. Appendix 2 shows the picture of Jane Street as it is now with our travel portions of the road and the property owner's encroachment out to the property or the travel portions of the road. 3 is a picture of the encroachment again, the other encroachments that we're dealing with in town. And 4 is the notice that we're sending out to the residents.
Thanks, Jim. So essentially there's 2 options, I guess, for us to consider. There's staff's recommendation, which simply is to enforce the bylaw and require the business owner to remove the canopy, which is encroaching on the town's right-of-way. Or secondarily, post the non-parking or the no parking signs and enter into some sort of encroachment agreement or encroachment license with that owner and require him to get the appropriate insurance to cover any liability issues.
Yes, and talking with Steve, our planner earlier today, we do have an encroachment agreement that I was unaware of until this afternoon with another property owner at the corner of Main Street and William, where part of the parking for that establishment does encroach onto town property. So there's been a long-standing encroachment agreement with that property owner.
Okay, thoughts, Councilor Bernardo?
First off, that's a seasonal business. It only operates from basically May, if you want to put it, right through to October through the winter months, there's nothing there. He closes up. And secondly, in my mind, he's been there for a very long time, and that encroachment hasn't just happened as of yesterday or a year ago or even 2 years ago. It's been there for quite a while. So I'm kind of disappointed, if I can say that it took a councillor to bring it forward to council. Staff never brought it forward to us previous. Never seemed to be a problem previous as far as staff. I'm more intent, because of the fact that it is seasonal, to go with the second option, the option of the no parking sign, spend the $500. I don't want to drive the man out of business. He obviously uses that area for his business. And if we start pushing it back, I don't know where he's going to put the stuff that he does put out, where he has any location to put it out, basically. So I'm more inclined to go with the second one, and I'm quite willing to go forward with that. And the fact that we already have a long-standing encroachment with another property owner just reinforces the fact that we can make the same issue with this property owner and keep his business. I'd rather him continue in business and not lose the business. The other part, I guess, of my thought process is when we put no parking down, I've seen it in other places, even in the city of Toronto, for example, if we want to use a classic example, where they paint lines on the street, and they do put no parking in that area of the lines along with the signage, so that it's more reinforced. They make it a square, no parking in between, where you can't park in that area. So if that is something that assists us in making sure that people don't park there, then maybe that's something we can do as well. Because like I said, it is a seasonal business. It's not a wintertime business. So anyway, that is my thoughts, and I'm prepared to go with that recommendation. And I'm prepared to move a motion in that regards.
Just for clarity's sake, I think Jim did mention the difficulties associated with painting lines in this case, because it is actually on an active lane of traffic. It's not really in like a parking lane. So
I mean, closer to the property, they put like a little square in that area, no parking, where people would park close by. I know it's not truly an active lane. I'm sort of getting towards the sidewalk.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Buffett and then Councillor Fegan.
Yes, just to further go along with what Councillor Donato has said, I have a motion prepared. I can read it out and then we can discuss it if you like. That council directs staff to proceed with the following recommendations for the encroachment matter on Jane Street relating to the property known as 60401 Sound Street, and that number 1, install no parking signs along Jane Street. And that would, I just want to ask a question about that. Can we also include adding a tow-away zone as well as a no parking? Just through you to Jim.
Through your worship, that might be a better question for Jennifer, not to put you on the spot, Jennifer.
Okay.
Towing is not identified in our traffic bylaw, and we would need to provide an amendment to the traffic bylaw. And then, of course, short form wording would need to be approved through the Administrative Attorney General.
Okay. So at this point, if we were to put it in a motion, or should we just leave it out if the motion was to carry? What would you suggest?
I would recommend initially a ticketing process, and if that doesn't work, then perhaps we progress to a towing process.
All right, so just continuing on with the motion, then the second point would be request that the property owner take out the liability insurance for $2 million that was suggested, and along with having a encroachment permit drafted up so that can then take place and allow the owner to continue to use the property as he's using it now. And again, just to echo some of the comments that Councillor Donato had stated, that this owner has been there for over 14 years and has operated that way all this time. And even before he had the structures up, there was always something along the side there, and it's always been used. There's never been a major problem with parking. And so having this parking not available there is not, I don't see that really causing any major problems on the street, because there's usually 2 or 3 cars at a time that come and go. So that's my motion, and somebody wants to second that?
Okay. All right, so we have a motion that's been made. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fegan, is that the second the motion?
Actually, I wanted to make a comment first, if I could.
Okay, can we just see if there's a seconder first, and then we'll have comments. Councillor Bernardo will second that. Okay, so moved by Buffett, seconded by Bernardo. Councillor Fegan, comments?
Yeah, I just want to echo the same sentiments as Councillor Bernardo and Councillor Buffett here. The biggest issue that I have is that this has been brought to the table now. If we were to go with staff's recommendation, then that means that we can't even address this again for at least another, 6 months as per our bylaw? Okay, so that means that even if we were to make him come into compliance and the issue persists, we can't even address this again until we're looking at May, June next year anyway. And I've been in this subdivision now for a very long time, 12 years plus. And even before he had those structures up, people were still parking on that street, even when there was parking available there. And I don't see that changing, even if we make him bring those structures back. And for me, I'd rather deal with it now than have to wait and then bring it back again.
Anybody else? No. Deputy Mayor?
Just a question. I don't know if Jim or anybody else can answer this, but when it comes to the liability insurance, and Councillor Buffett mentioned up to $2 million. What happens? And I'm not, suggesting that this is going to happen, but what if it were to exceed whatever claim that was brought were to exceed the $2 million? Is that then where the town would kick in, and the town would be responsible or partly responsible for any excess over the insurance over 2 million? And so that's question number one. And then number two, if in fact is the case, I'm wondering if in this agreement, because I'm not sure how these agreements are crafted, whether there's some form of hold harmless, in essence, agreement where they would agree that if there is any incident, that they would step in on the behalf of the town because of this contractual arrangement and their insurance, so to speak.
Denise?
Through the mayor to the deputy mayor, to your first question, if it was 2 million and the claim was over, the town would then be responsible for the balance. I know Councillor Buffett provided a motion. We had actually, as staff, considered that it would be a minimum of 2 million, because potentially if you characterize what could happen there is within the, I guess, the bucket of a motor vehicle accident, there's usually your claim potential and exposure to the town for those reasons. So we would want to consult with our insurer on whether it would be 2 or 5. And there could be a potential in this case, as staff would be recommending minimum of 2, that it would be 5. That policy cost would obviously be higher for the encroachment agreement holder, but we want to ensure, to your point, that the protection of the town is also considered as a critical issue.
And just as a last point to that,
Jim provided the issues, and I totally understand and empathize and appreciate the longevity of this business. The traffic count at that particular corner is very high. There still is exposure with lefts and rights if there's parking or no parking. And so again, I guess long answer, but it may not be 2. So we would take direction that it's a minimum of 2.
So just as a brief follow-up to that, just for a matter of consistency, I'm not sure the other property that was mentioned that also has this encroachment agreement. I don't know what their policy is, whether we suggested that they have 2 million, whether there's a higher traffic sort of movement in this proposed area versus that. But I certainly wouldn't want a situation where somebody, in this previous agreement, it only had to come up with a $2 million policy. And here we're asking them to come up with 5. So just for a matter of consistency, so that we avoid any potential issues being raised.
Thank you. And we'll look into that. The other thing that we've discussed as staff is the term while 1 year would give us flexibility to review, it's cumbersome to do so. So traditionally, we look at usually at least 2 or 3 year encroachment agreements. And unless there were problems, it would stand until that renewal time.
Okay, thank you.
So Councillor Buffett and Councillor Bernardo, are you okay with sort of making a minor adjustment, just to indicate that the $2 million is a minimum?
Yes.
All right, any other discussion? Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. Is everybody clear on the terms of the motion? Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll call the question then. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. All right. Next is the report from our Director of Financial Services, and I'm just going to ask the Deputy Mayor to assume the chair for a minute. I just have to slip out for 1 second.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Just give me a second here. Let me just follow where we are. Okay, so yes, we have a report from Director of Financial Services regarding the September 30th, 2021 financial update. And I guess is this Carrie that's providing this report?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
And through you, Deputy Mayor, this is the quarterly report for 2021 up to the end of September. I'm going to point you right to appendices 5, which talks about our budget schedule. And we had presented a draft budget schedule with the second quarter report. So this one has been amended slightly to add in the service delivery review report from Optimus for Monday, November the 22nd. And following that meeting, we've added a special budget meeting on November the 29th to allow staff and council a week to digest the service delivery review, and then come back to a special meeting to discuss the proposed 2022 budget framework. Following that meeting, it returns to the normal budget process where we present to council and then present to staff, and then followed by the adoption of the budget. So it does push it out a little bit, which we had discussed before with respect to waiting for the service delivery review, because it does have a very valid impact on the 2022 budget discussions. So even though we won't be adopting the budget until the new year, that gives us plenty of opportunity to have a fulsome budget discussion. There are some other items that I reported on with respect to the community garden project having its grand opening, as well as a couple of the grant intakes that we're currently involved with for the municipal modernization grant or Connecting Link grant. But what I really wanted to talk about this quarter is the small business subclass. And I had reported previously on this new legislation. And at the time when the province adopted their 2021 budget, the regulations had not been passed yet with respect to the small subclass. So those were adopted and released in May. And since then, county staff and lower tier staff have been meeting to discuss how this would look in Dufferin County. And I've actually attached as Appendix 6 a report that just went to County Council last week. So the mayor and deputy mayor will be familiar with that report. And what it did, and the reason I didn't bother rewriting it is because the county treasurer has done a phenomenal job of outlining all of the concerns that we as staff share with respect to rolling out this type of legislation. And the key word is that it is optional. It's not mandatory that this take place. And it's not mandatory that it take place immediately. So just because we're proposing that it doesn't roll out for 2022, which because of time constraints at this point now it can't, doesn't mean that it may not be introduced at some other point in time. But what staff need is more time to review the impacts of it. And there are a lot of impacts that restrict us with respect to being able to administratively do it, basically. And the county has outlined that. It also has budget implications, and it also may require redistribution of the tax burden. So, for example, if you're taking a tax reduction off of one tax class, it either has to be made up amongst the other tax classes, or it has to be a write-off in your budget. The other problem is it's very open to interpretation, the legislation. And what they've done is they've left it up to each municipality individually to decide what the definition of a small business is, which can mean a number of things. It also requires municipalities to appoint a program administrator as well as an appellant authority. So what that means is the way things work now, if a property owner appeals their assessment to the MPAC, it's actually MPAC that has the assessment review board and all that makes the final decision. In this case, it would come back to the municipality. So you would be relying on a staff member to validate their reason for whether or not this property owner qualified as a small business or not. And I don't know that council is prepared to have, staff in that position. It will create a very awkward position for staff, especially if the program administrator is also a staff person. The eligibility for the businesses there's just too many scenarios and too many variables. I already discussed the timelines. We would have to have any business that we decided would fall under this new tax class. We would have to have those provided to MPAC by October of the year prior to the year that you want to implement it. So that's why for 2022, it's too late. And we also looked into what other municipalities are reviewing this legislation. And I attended an MPAC webinar a week ago, and one of the questions that I asked was if any municipalities with a population of under 10,000 are considering it, and the answer was no. Currently, MPAC is only aware of 3 municipalities that are well underway in establishing this, and it's the City of Toronto, the City of Ottawa, and the City of Barrie. So at this time, long story short, countywide, we are recommending that this new legislation not be adopted at this time. Other than that, the report's pretty standard. I do mention in Appendix 4 the projects that have been awarded by RFP from July to September. So those are outlined. And other than that, the forecast is looking good for 2021. Having said that, the 2022 budget maybe doesn't look as good as we would like it to, but we'll discuss that in December.
Sorry, does that conclude your report, Karen?
Sorry,
Okay.
yes.
So we are just receiving this report, correct? Because it seemed that you alluded to, at least when it comes to the subclass, that you're recommending that we don't move forward with that. So I guess what I'm just wondering is that going to come to council at some other point to make a decision on that, or do we have to make a decision on that?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. Through you. At this time, staff are not recommending the implementation of this option, and that's highlighted in the report. So just by receiving the report, you are taking that recommendation. Perfect.
All right. Thank you. I mean, clearly there seems to be a lot of issues and concerns, and the fact that most municipalities, certainly around our population size, are not moving forward with that. The county seems to be supporting that. It just sort of begs the question as to why these other, whether it's Barrie or Toronto, why they're moving, what they see as the pros. Is it just because they have greater resources, greater population size, as to why maybe they see the benefits?
I believe so, and I think it is these larger urban areas that actually maybe spurred this movement. And I believe this was actually in play prior to COVID. I don't think this legislation was as a result of COVID. So I believe there was some appetite for it at a larger level. And you're right, they do have departments of staff that are able to, to carry this out and implement it from year, because it's a process that would have to be addressed annually, and you would have to keep your businesses, because businesses change so frequently, your list is going to change every year. There was also the discussion that you could make this application based. So that would require, if a business wanted to be in this tax class, they would have to make an application. So you would have to have administration staff administer that. And it, like I said, it would be an annual process. And there's no end date in this. Like once you establish this tax class, it would carry on. And it does require county's involvement, because they have to set the tax ratio. So it is a countywide tax implication. The other thing too is I don't know that the redistribution of the tax burden is considered all that fair, because especially in a town our size, where our residential taxes are, it's approximately 86%. If you take this reduction off of the commercial assessment, you're only adding to the residential tax base. Another thing that we do want to do in the county and Orangeville have already started the process is they had meetings with their economic development and their BIA. Shelburne has not had an opportunity to do that yet. And I know that this would be of interest to the BIA, and especially if there was a boundary expansion being considered, because that would also affect the amount of reduction or write-off if we were to expand the BIA boundary and include more small businesses other than just the downtown core. So there's too many unknowns for staff to recommend that we implement this at this time.
Okay, perfect. I see that the mayor's back, but I don't know if I should just finish this off. Mayor, or you want to just take over?
Okay, carry on if you want. You can finish this one. Yeah, that's good.
You just chilling. All right. I see that Councilor Bernardo has his hand up. Go ahead, Councilor Bernardo.
Personally, I think this was written for the bigger cities than for small communities like ours. I don't think in my mind, I agree with our treasurer. It just puts the burden. We don't have the industrial base that we can shift taxes on like the city of Toronto or Barrie or any of the other places have. We're shifting it right on to the residential tax base. I would never in my mind be in favor. While I understand small businesses have suffered through COVID, we're just not big enough to do it. And it's not fair. We already with 86% of our taxes coming from the residential base, it's just not fair shifting it off the business onto a resident. I don't think our residents are gonna be too happy that we're shifting it on to them. They're already complaining as it is with the fact that we have too high of taxes. So I would never vote in favor of this, doesn't matter what. That's just my comments.
Thank you for that, Councilor Bernardo. Anybody else with any questions or comments for Carrie? Before I ask for a mover to receive the report? Seeing none, can I get a mover to receive the report? See Councilor Hall and a seconder, Councilor Buffett. Is that okay? Okay. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Perfect. And just before I switch over to the chair, I just want to say, Carrie, on your report, you mentioned the community garden, and I certainly want to take the opportunity to thank staff and all the hard work, and certainly the stakeholders in our community for making that possible. So that was certainly a good news story within the report. So thank you for that. So I turn it over back to Mayor Mills to take over. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any notices of motion for this evening? No. Okay. Communications, there are 11 items listed there on this evening's agenda. Anything that anybody wants to address separately? Don't see any. Okay, can I get a motion then to receive those items listed under 8.0? Councillor Hall, seconder for that, Councillor Wagner. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so next is closed session. Can I get a mover to move into closed session per section 239 sub 2 sub F of the Municipal Act to discuss advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? Carried.